Most people will never know what it's like to have sex. Not because they're not having sex, but because sex is having them. And those are two very different things. So one is a compulsion, the other one's a choice. And I've been working with men for the past 8 years, and I've come to realize what is wrong with modern day sex education, and it's this. We are being taught how to say yes to sex, but we are not being taught how to say no. And so we have never learned how to sit in the intensity of our own sexual fire. And that's how you end up like this guy. I know it's a joke, but it's only funny because it's true, right? And I think we can all relate to this to some extent. But I believe as men, we should be able to go without sex or masturbation for 40 days without flinching. And that's what I'm here to show you today, is how to initiate ourselves into sex through abstinence instead of indulgence, and to attain real sexual liberation, which isn't the freedom to have sex, but is to be free from sex. Because as long as we can't say no to sex, we can't really say yes to it either. My partner has been in Bali with the little one for the past 2 months while I'm here in the UK. And we both have a very healthy sex drive, but at the same time, there's no anxiety or frustration around not having sex for this amount of time. There's no need to escape to porn or have a release through ejaculation. And I'm not saying this to brag, but because I would like everybody to have this, to experience this kind of freedom, to be unfazed by the presence or absence of sex. Of course, without suppressing our sexual desire either.
It's not that hard, Scott. Tell him, Wash.
It's incredibly hard.
Most of us got introduced to sex through indulgence, right? Through porn, hookups, experimentation. More often than not, thanks to the help maybe of a close relative or a slightly older friend. And very often in an environment of secrecy. And with that, a seed of shame gets planted. And this is where our unhealthy attachments start to take root. And so this is where the world will tell you, like, it's okay. Everybody watches porn. Everybody does this. Everybody does that. It's completely normal, because it believes that the antidote to shame is shamelessness, but it isn't. It's innocence. And that's the goal of a sex fast, is to get back to innocence, not because sex is bad, but because sex is so good that it needs that restoration. Fasting from sex is actually very much like leaving the Garden of Eden and then willingly walking into the desert, very much like Jesus was led into the wilderness to be tempted. Not for the sake of deprivation, but as a preparation for his public ministry. And so willful abstinence doesn't just prepare us for sex, it also prepares us for everything that comes with that. Finding the right woman, building relationships, fatherhood, servitude. And we forgot about this, because what we did is we've separated purpose from pleasure. And this is exactly what sex is. It is pleasure, which is feminine, plus purpose, which is masculine, is sex. And so that means that porn is not sex, masturbation is not sex, homosexuality is not sex. And following that same logic, we could even say that perhaps casual sex isn't even sex. And we forget about this. And I forgot about this until I became a father. And let me tell you, it is way better to initiate yourself than to wait for life to initiate you, with 10x the amount of suffering, not just to you, but also all the people involved. And so how do we do this? Now, before I get into this, I want to briefly circle back to this idea of the garden, because since the fall, we all have this longing to go back to the Garden of Eden, or to create heaven on earth ourselves. The problem is that we try to do this without God. Just like the Israelites who escaped out of Egypt, they of course wanted to get to the Holy Land, which was supposed to take 11 days, but God made them wander through the desert for 40 years because they doubted God's word and they didn't trust his commandments. Now, why am I bringing this up? It is because we have a template here to work with, and that shows us what not to do and what to do instead, because Jesus did in 40 days what the Israelites couldn't do in 40 years. Breaking free out of slavery or out of Egypt is only part of the journey. The second part of the journey is to learn how to rely on God again and to trust his word, because this is how the fall happened in the first place. And so the first part is all about willpower, determination, and discipline. The second part is about surrender, trust, and obedience. It is a push versus a pull, and most teachers focus a lot on the push, but they don't focus a lot on the pull. So when you walk into the desert, meaning you're starting your sex fast, you do need a healthy dose of discipline, but it has more to do with clarity than anything else, meaning you want to be clear why you're doing this, and secondly, you want to be clear where you're going. And then once you're in, you can expect 3 temptations. The first one is the lust of the flesh, then there's the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. The lust of the flesh, of course, is our physical needs, pleasure, and comfort. Now, the Israelites, they pretty much complained their entire way through the desert. Kind of like, imagine if you're trying to take a toddler on a hike, probably something like this.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? No. Are we there yet?
They were even missing Egypt because at least they had food. And in the same way, we can also expect to miss our old life because at least it was giving us a sense of comfort, right? And so it's totally normal for a while to grieve your attachments. Jesus, on the other hand, he gets tempted to turn stones into bread, but he refuses to give in to his physical needs and says that man doesn't just live on bread alone, but on every word that comes out of God's mouth. And so what this means for us is that we don't want to just give in to our superficial sexual needs and to just not to suppress our sexual needs entirely, but to sit with them until it reveals a deeper desire, a deeper hunger, so that we have something real to work with. And this is why I often say that we want to embrace our desire, but without acting on it. And this is the first step. The second temptation is the lust of the eyes. And this is where I see a lot of people get stuck because it is a gap between choosing change and actual change. And so this is a transition. It is the redirection, and that takes a lot of trust. The Israelites, they constantly demanded signs and proof of God's providence because they wanted to see it before they could believe it. And so they eventually even built a golden calf so at least they would have a God that they could see and feel. Jesus, on the other hand, he was tempted to throw himself off of the Jerusalem temple of all things as a way to prove that God would save him if he did. Yet he calmly responds, as he always does, "Do not put the Lord your God to the test." And so what this means for us is that we have to trust the process and not get obsessed with the results and the streaks and the superpowers, which is mostly just to boost our ego anyway and to eventually in the end say, look, I did it, right? And so this is all about redirecting our desire from what the body wants to what the soul wants, and from what the soul wants to what the spirit wants. And the spirit wants God, not power.
So whenever you were like walking across the water, did you ever think like for a second like, oh, it'd be so funny to be like, whoa, and like really trip everybody out? I'm sorry.
Now the final temptation is of course pride, right? Which is where it all started. This was the first sin that caused the fall to begin with, for rebelling against God's authority. And the Israelites, they pretty much consistently refused to submit to God's authority and even questioned Moses' authority as their leader several times, which added several years and a lot of unnecessary obstacles to get to the Holy Land. Jesus was offered kingship over all the kingdoms in the world as long as he bowed down to Satan. And again, he calmly quotes, "Worship the Lord your God and serve him only," choosing submission over sovereignty and eventually choosing the cross over the crown. We often wear our wins as a badge of honor, right? For respect, for status. And yet sooner or later, we are going to face a battle that we cannot win on our own. And that's a good thing because we don't want to be victorious without God, because it would just set us up for pride to then fall again. And so this is where we come to realize that our deepest desire is actually desire for God, that we don't want to be a slave to sin. We want to be in service to him, the one who provides everything and more that the world never could, because the world can never satisfy a spiritual hunger. And this is the roadmap through the wilderness back to the Garden of Eden, because the desert, what it does is it prepares us so that we can truly say yes to sex, yes to our wife, and yes to God, not from compulsion, but from choice. And that is real sovereignty. And if you're still watching this, I believe it's because you feel this calling to the wilderness, because you know that the wilderness is the road to your calling. And like I said before, it's not about deprivation, it's about a preparation for real intimacy, for finding love and for building the family and a legacy. Because what the wilderness does is these three things. It removes all of the crutches that we're leaning on so that it reveals what's inside of us, who we are and what we're made of. So we develop deep roots that withstand the storms of life. And all of these three perhaps answers the most important question we have as men, which is, do I have what it takes? And there's only one way to find out. Guys, thanks for watching. If you need any help walking through the wilderness, click the link below. We'll jump on a call and see what is happening for you. Other than that, I will see you again next week.